Okay, I was hoping I could get Antigone into the previous video, but I ran out of time, so this one will be markedly shorter, I assure you. And by the way, I know my hair is really something special today. I am aware of it. I guess I'm not motivated enough to do anything about it, but it's the hair that God gave me. Um, a little background to the plot of Antigone. I said in the previous lecture that Antigone is kind of a sequel to Oedipus the King, but it's not an immediate sequel because there are things that happen in the intervening time. According to at least one tradition, when Oedipus was exiled from Thebes, which of course happens at the end of the play, or at least it looks like it's going to happen at the end of Oedipus the King, the tradition is that Oedipus went to a place called Colonus, Colonus, just outside of Athens, and that Antigone went there to tend to him in his dying moments, and Sophocles actually wrote a play about this called Oedipus at Colonus. We're not reading it, but he wrote it. So there's some of the background. Now the more immediate background is that Antigone's brothers, Polynices and Eteocles, if you want to look at those names, look at the very beginning, the very first page of your copy of Antigone. It'll have the names there, and you can see how they're spelled. So Eteocles and Polynices, they, as sons of Oedipus, take over the reins of power in Thebes. Now, initially, they were supposed to share power, but we know how this goes with brothers. And what happens is that the younger brother, Eteocles, actually expels the older brother, Polynices. Now, that's not a very nice thing to do, but arguably what Polynices does next is even worse, because Polynices then goes and recruits an army kind of a mini army of 7 great warriors, including himself, and they come back to invade and conquer the city of Thebes. What happens to the brothers? Well, as you find out very early in Antigone, both brothers die. Okay? So obviously Polynices fails in his attempt, but Eteocles is killed as well. So these are the events that have just occurred right as Antigone, the play, begins. And of course, the premise of Antigone has to do with Creon's decree. Creon, as sort of next of kin, then becomes king. So he's just become king, and that's very important to think about and ponder as you read Antigone, right? What kind of position is a new king in, and what are some of the dangers of being new to the throne? What are some of the challenges in terms of gaining credibility and holding on to power? So think about those things when you think about Creon's situation. But Creon thinks he needs to make a statement here, make a statement about Polynices' treachery, and really there is no question that he was a kind of traitor to his city. So of course, as you find out in the opening pages of Antigone, he issues a decree according to which Eteocles is to be buried with all state honors, but Polynices is to be left unburied, to be torn apart by animals and pulverized by the elements. And that sets up the drama of Antigone. Will Antigone, will Ismene, will they accept that? Will they defy that edict? And so on. Here's what I want you to do as you read the play. Really think about the main characters and their point of view. Not only their position, but how they support, how they argue for their position. Starting with Ismene. Ismene, of course, in a way is a kind of more minor character, but she's still an important character. So ask the question, why won't she help her sister? What are some of the arguments that she gives? Do the arguments really hold up? Does she seem to be driven maybe by other considerations? But again, try to be sympathetic. Why might Ismene respond in the way that she is? Of course, you're going to want to also pay very, very close attention to Antigone's response. It's going to be very clear very soon how she responds. The question is, how does she justify her actions? Because she tries to. So on what grounds does she justify her defiance of the edict? What are the best possible arguments that you could put forward on behalf of her behavior? But then be looking for places where you might detect that there are other motivations in play other than the more sort of high-minded, principled reasons that Antigone gives. And ask yourself this as well. Who or what does Antigone really care about? And conversely, who or what does she not really seem to care much about? And then finally, Creon. And this will take us to one of your discussion prompts this week. I want you to try to put forward the best possible case for Creon. I think we, and it's maybe especially as modern people, we immediately start rooting against Creon. Sometimes in stage versions of Antigone, he is presented simply as a kind of, out-and-out, mustache-twirling villain. I don't think that's how Sophocles actually portrays him. I don't think that's what Sophocles wants us to think about Creon. So how does he defend his position, and why might he act the way that he does, even if you think he made a big mistake or made a couple of big mistakes? How can we be sympathetic with him? How can we have some understanding of why he might have acted the way that he did? And again, allow him to be a complicated figure. I think Antigone is a very complicated figure. Creon is too. And like Antigone, sometimes he'll give one one rationale for his actions, but it might also appear that other motivations are in play. In addition, keep in mind what I said in the previous video about how tragedies often function as a kind of form of political reflection. So again, what might Creon and Creon's actions have to say about the dangers of one-man rule? Again, this is a play produced for a democracy, written by someone, Sophocles, who lived in a democracy, but the play is about monarchy. So what may be the political commentary that Sophocles is trying to offer here? And I think there is, again, like we saw, like you'll see hopefully in Oedipus the King, a kind of warning, a kind of caution about the dangers of one-man rule. Finally, don't forget about the chorus. The chorus is a very important character in its own right, especially in this play. Now, you'll notice as you read along that for most of the duration of the play, the chorus is siding with Creon. It really seems to be backing Creon, which makes sense, because in a way, Creon is the one who seems to be most concerned about the welfare of the city at large. And the chorus, of course, is made up of ordinary citizens of the polis. So that's going to be their main concern. And like Oedipus and Oedipus the King, Antigone would seem to be a threat to the stability of the polis. But as you read on, as you get toward the end, notice the shift. The chorus is going to shift its position. When does that happen? And why does that happen? Why is the chorus sort of seeing events differently by the end than it did at the beginning? All right, one more thing to consider, and then we'll be done here. I said in the previous video that every tragedy is going to have at least one tragic hero. In the case of Oedipus the King, there's no controversy about this, right? Nobody's going around saying, well, I think maybe Jocasta is the real tragic hero. No, I mean, everybody agrees Oedipus is the tragic hero of Oedipus the King. It's a much less straightforward matter in Antigone. And indeed, simply to ask the question, who is the tragic hero here, may be a misleading question because it presupposes that there can only be one. Well, maybe, but maybe not. Now, given the title of the work, I think we are predisposed to assume that, of course, it's Antigone who's the tragic hero. For goodness sake, the play is named Antigone. And I think you can make a case for that. I think you can make a case that Antigone is the tragic hero. But here's just something to think about. Remember the definition of a tragic hero that I gave you in the previous video. Someone whose powerful wish to achieve some goal seems inevitably to come up against limits against which she or he is powerless, with the result being humiliation, death, exile, something like that. Now the question is, what are Antigone's real goals here, and does she actually achieve them? Now, I mean, the outcome, like a spoiler alert here, but the outcome is not good for Antigone in the sense that, you know, she's dead at the end of the play. But what were her goals all along, and were her goals actually accomplished in some way or another? I think you could make an argument that yes, her goals were accomplished, but as you read, you need to ask yourself that question: what does she really seem to want, and does she get it by the end of the play? I think a very strong case can be made that Creon is in fact the tragic hero of the play, or at least a tragic hero of the play. And rather than lay out my case, or one possible case for that, I will just remind you that right underneath the reading, the Sophocles readings on Canvas, there is a handout that I have uploaded. So I would take a look at that, and what I've done in that handout is show you Aristotle's criteria for a tragic hero. A tragic hero ought to sort of check all these boxes. And I try to make the case in this handout that if we're basing our understanding of a tragic hero on Aristotle, Creon actually fits the bill quite well, arguably even better than Antigone herself. Now, there's room for debate on this, and this is the beauty or maybe the frustration of studying literature, that there's not sort of one right answer at the back of the book. But these are the kinds of things I want you to be thinking about as you read the play. All right, I promised I would be brief, and I'm going to stop this before we get to 14 minutes.